The fact that today a lot of these discussions happen at the elites sort of level, and in fact, I think this is something that we see a lot in adaptive leadership conversations in general, where we are all hypothetically interested in the people whose lives will be disproportionately impacted by this, but the center of the work often focuses much more on the personalities and the institutions who are 1 or 2 steps removed away from the actual people who we want to benefit. And so, I think our panelists will certainly have perspectives on that, but that's also a topic I'd love to, yes.
I'm just a slight disagreement on just being the elite discussing this. To give an example, in one of the shifts where people put cars together in the Bosko plant, we have to have a shift book. It's really paper, so you have to fill in what's happened all the day in the shift, and then you have to give it to the next shift. And one of the chiefs of the shifts was wondering, because nothing was in this book anymore. Yeah, because the guys from the shift have set up a WhatsApp group, and everything was in there, but they didn't include their boss. For obvious reasons maybe, but they documented everything, so they adopted far more quickly than the boss or the company. So I would tend to, let's not be so not knowing what's happening, because we are, an elite group, but the people that actually work with the technology, they're also discussing this, so it's not just us.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's a point well taken. And actually, if I think back to some of the conversations that have happened in this conference already, you could argue that the election of Trump, the Brexit vote, were perhaps potential early indicators of people who have felt disempowered and who are trying to take action. But yes, why don't we move on to some of our panelists' remarks. Perhaps, Bosko, if you go first, and then Molly, you following.
Great. Do you want to take that?
Yeah, so I'll test it. Yes, it works. Great. Well, thank you, and thank you, Tevsang. I'll start from the I'd say more global and top perspective and bring it down. I'll start from the purpose of leading disruptive technologies, disruptive innovations, then the state of play among the major factions and their perceptions about the adaptive challenges and their perceptions at all about, different perceptions about the disruptive technologies, possible impacts. But firstly, I'll add how glad I am to be here today with all of you. It was highly, let's face it, highly unlikely that I'll be today on this floor with you. I've been training people for the last 15 years or more at the forefront of changes, how to outperform the rules, the system, how to disrupt systems. Now, those of you who had at certain point in your work felt threatened for your jobs, for your lives, for your families, who had walked on the line without a safety net, those of you can imagine how many authorities are at the moment concerned of what I might say and share with you. So it is a great privilege. And why am I here? Because I strongly believe that our work is very deeply connected, and that there is a possibility that we can create a leadership network, a network that will lead a mindset revolution. As I've heard many of you believe that disruptive technologies are good, that they may bring advancements in terms of quality of life, primarily, health, food, other issues. But I also listened that there were quite a few concerns raised. And I wonder how many of you believe that we will live to see in our lives a world where we are fully tapped into the potentials of the technologies that we already have. Meaning the world without illness, without hunger, without poverty. Let's go even broader, that you'll experience traveling to space, stuff like that. And that leads me to one of the central questions, is apparently looking at the UN's millennium priority for all the citizens to have high quality of life, to preserve the well-being and ensure sustainability. It appears that at this moment globally we're moving in the opposite direction, despite of all the scientific and technological breakthroughs and what we have already. And it raises a question in my mind. Are we facing the moment that we need a fundamental mindset revolution, a new capacity to govern the impacts, to govern the disruptive technologies? So the government that would enable us to properly and adequately manage the risks on one side, and also on the other side to tap into the full potentials. And I've been listening in the EU, and I'm glad that I see that some of you are coming also from the EU. I've been listening recently a speech by European Commission's President Juncker saying we need a stronger and more inclusive Europe. And I've also been listening a little bit during the USA election, those messages saying we need to make America great again. To my mind, those visions are very short-sighted and unsustainable, because truly disruptive innovations are global, have a global impact. So we essentially need to have a holistic reconnection and capacity for communication and management on a global level. So that immediately triggers for many of you, I guess, the perception, if we look from top down, on who the major factions are. Starting from the power elite. I've heard them being called during the media campaign in the United States the top 1%, so those who own the world. And they seem to perceive disruptive innovations and disruptive technologies more as a risk, as a danger, than an opportunity. And if they perceive disruptive technology as opportunity, then their major interest is to see how to ensure I'd say, total control, to advance the control and the profitability and ensure their positions. And then the second, being below the top of this pyramid, the second layer, the major faction, are those who are formally appointed by others to manage the world's mess, at the moment, as if I can call it that way. So those people who are in the positions to control organizations of various kinds, like national governments, multinational companies, those who control the armed forces, political centers of power, economy, and so on, who closer to the top from what I was listening, perceive disruptive innovation again more as a risk. And what I've been listening in the last few days here as well is this discussion, communication, which is great to have between those three factions, closer to the top, those who are managing frameworks of power, they see more like an incremental improvement and advancement is a better way than disruption, how to progress. Yes, I'll open space for questions. And then lower in the value chain, I see opportunities. I see that I'm listening to opportunities for people who seem to want to progress at a faster pace and who want changes to happen more swiftly and adaptations. And down the third faction, I'd say people, but particularly those who feel disempowered, who feel that they are sacrificed for the benefits of other two factions, and struggling essentially for their existence, for survival, for their careers and so on. Mostly this is where I've seen the greatest potential and initiative and motivation for disruptive innovations, because they perceive disruptive technologies as enablers, as a way to empower themselves to take more proactive roles in the government on one side, but also to secure their own health, well-being, or see some new lucrative markets and build up more profits and so on. And that leads me to start up a little bit of the discussion with the typical statement that I would say to most of my clients, depending from what was the faction where they're coming from. For those who are from this, I'd say, third faction, the typical statement to kick off discussion with them and how to progress is, and they are aware of it, is just telling the truth bluntly, open, that nobody wants you to succeed if you're leading disruptive technologies. And that also brings me to open a question that I typically open if I'm speaking with someone who is closer to the top of the pyramid, is are you facing the new realities, the new emerging realities, apparently sacrificing one of the major faction, as you've raised? How do I tell majority of people who might be losing their job or needing to shift and upgrade and adjust, how do they manage that? So are the sacrifices going to backfire, and are they already backfiring? So those would be the introductory questions, and I hope we'll have a very interesting discussion.
Great, thank you. Yeah, lots to unpack, and yeah, looking forward to hearing more. Molly.
Great. Well, first, thank you all so much. This is a great opportunity. I must admit, I was an MPAID in 2008, and I'm going to have to start with a confession to this crowd. I used all of my points for negotiation, not for HIFITs. And I regretted that so much in the subsequent years, because every time I would talk to an alum, I used to be on the board of the Kennedy School, every time I talked to an alum, what was the one class that you really stuck with you, that really shaped your career after the Kennedy School? It was more often than not the leadership course. So when my husband did the mid-career program a few years ago, I insisted he took all of his points on HIFITs, and he did, and it was great. So this is my coming back to try to glean a little bit of the adaptive leadership brilliance that I clearly missed out on in my 2 years at the Kennedy School. I'm really excited for this discussion, and I was delighted to hear so many of the comments, because a lot of the points you picked up on in your few minutes talking really resonate with the research I'm leading at Georgetown and truly the issues that keep me up at night and that really intrigue me. So I'm